Going, everybody. Happy Monday and welcome back to another edition of the Ad Podcast. I have such a fun conversation with you guys today. We have Monica Chun is the president of Acceleration Community of Companies. Prior to that, she spent 2 decades at PMK BNC, where I started my career working for Howard Bragman over 23 years ago. Also working on clients like Samsung, Audi, and American Express, to name a few. Monica, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Hello, Dylan. Hello, everyone.
I'm
excited for this conversation.
Yeah, so, this conversation is really exciting. It is basically Acceleration Community of Companies partnered with a research institution. I believe it was USC. Is that correct?
Yes, USC Annenberg.
Yeah, so USC Annenberg. And they did a study on the emerging trend and influence of Gen Alphas. And for those of you that aren't exactly familiar with Gen Alpha, characterized between the ages of 10 and 14 years old, they're the first truly digital native generation, literally born with a tablet in their hand at a very young age, have been, assisted, parentally assisted by tablets. And more often than ever coming in possession of their first device and their first fully connected device to the internet at younger and younger ages. This year, me and my wife decided to buy Tegan, my Gen Alpha oldest daughter, who's 11, who will be 12 coming up on October 11th. We bought her first cell phone. She bought it herself by earning money, doing acting and modeling and doing creator work. So,
wow,
so she bought the phone with her own money, but we weren't going to connect it. We weren't going to get her a cell plan at 10 years old. At least we thought that. So we originally just got her the device so she could, connect to Wi-Fi and download apps and play games. But then she was going to summer camp this summer, and because of the entertainment industry stuff, we needed to have a direct line to her in case any auditions came in that she would need to do self-tapes for and then send them back to my wife, who's her manager. And we did end up having to do that 2 or 3 times while she was at summer camp. And that kind of, unleashed her being a fully, connected Gen Alpha. I think it's really exciting, the research that you guys are putting together and this dynamic that how influential this generation is in the purchase decisions of what we would traditionally call the chief household officer or the mom, how much this Gen Alpha generation is informing purchase decisions and just influencing the broader family at large. So Monica, thanks so much. Hopefully that's a good tee up. Let's maybe start off with your background a little bit, and then we'll dive into the research. But where did you grow up? What got you into PR and marketing? And 20-year career at PMK BNC. You don't hear about that every day. So tell us a little bit about your background.
I am originally from Houston, Texas. I spent 12 years there. And then I moved to Seoul, South Korea. And I went to an international high school in Seoul. And then I went to college at Boston University. And then my mom wanted me to move to Los Angeles because I had friends there. And so I remember going to the library and looking up the Dwyer's book or whatever the book was that had the list of agencies and just sort of picking one that was a few that were in LA. And I remember I wrote a letter to Brad Caffarelli and somebody else answered it. Chris Robichaud, who I started out as an assistant in 1996, and he hired me because he had went to college in Boston, and I was coming from Boston, and that was the beginning of my career at Bragman Nyman Caffarelli, which turned into PMK BNC, and then to Acceleration. Yeah, so I have literally spent the entirety of my career with the same people. Which is definitely unusual, but I loved it because every day was something different. And throughout my career, I got to work on, everything from Gatorade to PlayStation to Samsung to Smirnoff Ice to Target to Beats by Dre to MAC Cosmetics, The Honest Company. And so, multiple categories, multiple brands. And you sort of, Nike Jordan, hundreds and hundreds of product launches. And, the sort of commonality around all of them is that everybody is always desiring that 18 to 34-year-old audience, right? And so when I started, I was that audience, I was the audience, I understood it. And then over time, sort of my obsession with learning about behavior and what drives consumer decision and what that process is and how it has evolved over time, it is something that I obsess over and that I love to learn about. And I have a Gen Z kid, not a Gen Alpha kid. So, seeing the difference from even how he makes purchasing decisions and what his influence is to what I see with Gen Alpha kids who are younger, it's really fascinating. And, you can say every generation is similar. They all have influence in some way, but it's really those sort of small nuances that make a huge difference. And so that's just a little bit about me.
I love it. As a great PR pro, you're staying on brief, but I want to stick with your background a little bit before we jump over to the research. So 20 years at PMK BNC, and then my guess is Michael and team approached you to jump ship and come over to what they were building at ACC. So tell me a little bit more about that pivot. What's it been like going through this 20 career within the IPG holding company, PMK BNC being kind of the shiny object within the larger group, doing this really high impact entertainment work, working with celebrities and brands and red carpet events and kind of like the glitz and glam side of the PR industry, but also merging that with brand marketing. What's it like then going to what you guys are building over at ACC now?
I remember in 1999, I was working on the launch of the PlayStation 2. And that was sort of, the first time where, this is before obviously social media is very much about celebrities. And I remember the brand wanting to position itself not as a gaming system, but as an entertainment device, and sort of like break out beyond the category and appeal to everyone. And so that was probably one of the first high profile campaigns where, we really learned about the power of entertainment and appealing to people through their passion points, which in this case was, different celebrities and, placing it in different TV shows. I remember Ben Affleck and went on a late night show and was talking about, hey, I want a PlayStation and can you give me, and can you give Matt one too? And us doing these sort of like launch events that were almost like actually launch events that were red carpet events. So we launched them like we did some sort of Hollywood premiere. And at the time it was, we had a bunch of A-list celebrities just come for the opportunity to get a free PlayStation. This was before it was like, pay me for everything that I do. And so that was a lot of fun. And, that from, we did that with GM, through the launch of Cadillac and their partnership with Shaq, to doing different, activating at Super Bowl and Sundance and Grammys, back when there was a lot of big splashy parties and celebrity launch events. We then did, T-Mobile. I don't know if anybody remembers a Sidekick. I mean, we're going like way back, right? When Paris and Lindsay, I mean, there's definitely the continuity is this sort of social currency and leveraging talent, consumers, entertainment, and people's passion points to have a deeper connection with them. And so I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to work on so many different clients that sort of, bringing brands and entertainment together. And, at the time, culture was very simple. Culture was entertainment, right? It was entertainment, it was music, it was fashion, film. Now it's so many different things. It's very wide reaching and it's whatever is in the moment. But at the time, culture was very much defined by celebrity and movies and television shows and sort of that prime time. So I found it, it was very intoxicating. And it was very fun. And I was doing very cool things. I was on private jets with different celebrities, flying to the Super Bowl, doing VMA parties, going to Sundance every year, go to South by when it was at its peak. I've had a lot of fun and a lot of sort of first time bucket list type experiences over the course of the last 20 plus years, more than 20 plus years. So it was fun, it was cool. And I definitely, and that's a large part of the reason that I stayed. The interesting being able to do all those different things, but then also the people that I worked with.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love it. Well, excited to dive into the research and get into the specifics of this study. So let's start with the insight. So what got you guys excited about this idea of Gen Alpha and the idea of alpha rising, and what was kind of that insight and question that you guys wanted to answer before going into the research? What was that insight, or what were you looking to solve before going into getting the results?
So I'll just give you a little bit of background. We have this annual partnership with USC Annenberg, and it is a think tank with their graduate students, and we pair them up with different marketers within ACC. So the first year we did it around Gen Z, and the reason that we picked them is because all of them were part of Gen Z, and so we thought it would be interesting to kind of see it, for them to talk about Gen Z in their words, since there were so many different people there's all these different Gen Z studies that were done. And so this was done by them for other Gen Zers and for different brands.
Love that.
Then, and then we were trying to think about, okay, what do we want to do for this year? And last year, you will remember there was all these different articles about Sephora kids, and then buying $90 drunk elephant serums and rare beauty blushes. And I think what we wanted to do was sort of dig into that behavior and really understand, are these kids just sort of performing adulthood, or do they actually, understand, or are they actually more sophisticated? Because anyone can see that the kids these days are definitely aging up faster, right? They are. You had mentioned that your daughter, Tegan, you got her a phone at 11, right? Which seems to be sort of the average age. But in reality, they're interacting with technology much earlier.
Way earlier, yeah.
They have iPads, they're playing at like 2 years old. And so where influence used to be, starting around 13, 14, it's really now starting much earlier at 8 to 9 years old. And then, we talk about full wallet control by the time they're 13.
Wow.
And so we really wanted to sort of dig into this and talk to them and get a better understanding of how they think and how they shop, and then what were some of the insights that we could learn and glean from them that maybe hadn't been said, and what were some, like I mentioned before, what were some of the nuances that were different. And so that was really the catalyst for us wanting to dig deep on Gen Alpha, and also we were realizing, like, it's only a matter of time. Like Gen Alpha, we need to be understanding them now because of we had a feeling, which was validated through our study, that they were much more influential than we had originally thought.
Yeah, by the time they turn 18, it's almost too late. They've already developed brand loyalties. They've already developed consumer purchasing behaviors, and they have integrated, like you said, my daughter, Apple Pay has become a new highly used feature. Like, I don't hand them cash anymore. It's like I'll get a text or an Apple Pay request because they want to take money out of their bank account to do XYZ, and like they're already into digital payments and transactions. So I think you're right. Like, if you don't think about building a relationship and not just kids brands, we're not talking about toys and video games and snacks, although those things are all important and influenceable as well. But as you mentioned, this idea of skincare and beauty at a much younger age, and the idea that they're also having a bigger impact on family purchases, like what refrigerator should we buy? What car should we buy? Where should we go on vacation next year? What was the biggest thing? What was the biggest surprise from the study that you weren't expecting and that, kind of shocked you in some ways?
The biggest surprise is that they are truly the gatekeeper of family decisions. And the actual sort of influence and power, spending power that they have. And you had actually just mentioned something, but one of the I think you think that they get allowance, right? And so I think there was a stat like they get $67 in weekly spend, but that's not the
Wow.
only thing that they're spending, right? You had just mentioned your daughter has Apple Pay, right?
Right.
So 1 in 4 parents have added their kid onto their Apple Pay or given them a credit card or established, like on Amazon, there's like a teen approval thing so that it is so shopping is very seamless. So while they may have a set allowance that they're spending, that is not all that they are spending, right? They are deciding what type of groceries you're buying, what ingredients, where you're going to eat, where you're going on vacation, what car to buy. In some instances, they are introducing their parents to new brands. They are teaching them about trends. I think the statistic was 96, a whopping 96% of them get their family to try new things. And then 70% help their family or their family members keep up with new trends. In some of the focus groups, we were talking about, you had mentioned this with your wife and your daughter. A mom she was talking about how she was trying on, a lipstick and some eyeshadow. And she was like asking her daughter, what do you think about this? And the daughter was like, that's completely the wrong shade. And you should know this because you're a winter, not a summer, or you know what I mean? And the mom was like, oh, okay. Another mom was talking about how, she buys clothes on Amazon because it's trendy and it's cheap, it's easy. And the daughter was like, no. If you're going to buy sweatpants, you need to buy them from Aritzia because Aritzia quality is so much better. And so the daughter introduced the mother to the Aritzia brand. And then she's like, oh yeah, the quality is much better. The fabric is much nicer. And so, these are young kids that are introducing their parents to adult brands, and the parents are listening. And so, whereas like culture usually flows sort of downstream, what we're seeing is that it now flows upstream.
Wow. Yeah. And I think that just has to be from social discovery, right? It's TikTok, it's Instagram, it's YouTube Shorts. I imagine, so one of the things, of course, like there's a yin and the yang to early social media usage, right? Like you hear stories about depression and the algorithm, and maybe it has a negative impact on teenage girls because it makes them compare themselves to others, or they get depressed if they put up a piece of content that doesn't get a lot of engagement. And I think, there are valid criticisms and, red flags to be looking for in regards to younger social media usage. My perspective has always been, these are the tools of the future, and the kids have to learn to use them as young as possible because they are going to, it's like AI. Like if you don't know how to use AI as a professional right now, you're being left behind. Well, I feel kids who don't have access to these social media apps are also going to be left behind. And one of the things that I found really interesting is, as much as I was afraid, like, okay, well, I'm going to be watching this content and being influenced in what things to purchase. And they're, trying on makeup and skincare and things like that, maybe at a younger age than I would have expected as a dad. My daughter also, in a drive to school the other day, interviewed me for an hour asking me questions about being a real estate agent and like investing in real estate and flipping houses. And, like she's like all about like she wants to like buy her first, house and flip a house like already at 11 years old. Right. So I think there's so much like positive things that they can learn and be influenced. And I don't know how my daughter found this and went down this rabbit hole of like real estate investing, becoming a real estate agent, and house flipping, but it feels like that's an equal parts good to any negative things that, so many people and so many parents might have some hesitation around letting their kids use these apps at a younger age. I wonder how you guys butted up against the broader conversation around, is it healthy for kids to use social media? What was, how did that kind of inform some of the research that you guys did?
There's a lot of things I want to unpack there because there's some fun things. So just one of the things that you had mentioned. So we did actually ask in our survey of Gen Alpha kids about milestones and sort of
Nice.
like what are some things that they're looking forward to. And obviously there are definitely things like I want to get married, I want to go to college, but it wasn't so much about like getting my first job as it was about starting a new business, becoming financially independent. So they're much more aware. They have a much more entrepreneurial mindset. And they are sort of looking at, I guess you could say, actually an entrepreneurial and a marketing mindset. And, you know, and so they look at things sort of like in the long term. And we're like, do they even emotionally understand that because they're so young? But they do love sort of relishing in very specific information and really going down the rabbit hole and learning so much about things that they love. Whereas like with Gen Z, we learned, okay, they love obscure information. Whereas like Gen Alpha is very much about sort of the specifics. And then what was the last thing you just asked me before that?
Oh, that's okay. Yeah. So you touched on some of the things, and I was just wanting to know how did you guys juxtapose the positive benefits of social media and kids getting connected through social with maybe some of the things that the culture tells us around, like, girls being depressed earlier, using, like thinking about using cosmetics and skincare, and kind of just growing up too fast, I guess. How did that
I think you can
surface?
look at it in two ways. On the positive, I would say influence is probably Gen Alpha's greatest skill. The other thing that they do is because they have grown up drowning in information, alerts, social feeds, notifications, videos, their brains have adapted to scanning and sorting and prioritizing information very fast, right? So they decide very quickly what deserves attention, and what to pay attention to and whatnot. They know how to like context switch very rapidly. So in that sense, they are quick. They're a little bit impulsive. They're quick to make decisions, but they can filter out sort of like what's important, or at least important to them. I think what was sort of interesting, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but when the other thing that we were talking with the parents, a lot of them, we asked them about what restrictions do they have on social media, right? And almost all of them, especially with the younger girls, put restrictions on Instagram, right? And none of them put any restrictions on AI. And the reason, because they're assuming that they're using things like ChatGPT for homework, right? But then, like, one of the things that we found, especially in the think tank, is like one of the participants was talking about she caught her 12-year-old sister talking to my AI on Snapchat and asking it for advice, something like friend advice, right? And so, one of the things that I think in one of the statistics was 35% are using AI to, as like almost like a friend, right?
Wow.
And, getting advice, looking for like almost like guidance or whatnot, right? And so how they're using it is evolving. And even by the time we published this study, I remember ChatGPT had just announced that they have like a new task feature, right? So you can now tell ChatGPT different tasks to do. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing that we saw is that they like to connect in real life just as much as they like to be online. I know with Gen Z, there was like, when we did Gen Z, it was concerning that they were like, okay, they're spending too much online, that they're losing some of their social skills, right? Whereas like with this generation, they very much have interest in meeting people online. And that actually led us to sort of, we were seeing all these articles about, is the shopping mall dead, right? The shopping malls are dead. But it's only like certain shopping malls that are dead. And one of the things in our discussion was how Gen Alpha wants to see the physical manifestation of their For You page. So what they discover online, they want to see it in person. And I believe like 45% said that they were, don't quote me on that, but I know it's close, were more interested in going to a mall or shopping center or some sort of like destination if it featured brands or food or items or something that they saw on their TikTok or saw online. And so the shopping centers or malls or those type of mixed development or whatnot, the ones that are sort of incorporating that, and understand that when Gen Alpha is, they want to kind of like experience the world within their shopping centers, are the ones that are doing well. And I think the example we gave was Americana at Brand, because they had Dr. Jart, which was a Korean beauty brand, and they did a pop-up and it gave away some free ramen. And that was probably one of the most, they had to close it early because they sold out so fast because there was so much interest. So I thought that was very interesting, just in terms of like how they think and what appeals to them.
Yeah, I've totally seen that trend. My daughter, oftentimes, when she is going to go hang out with friends, she wants to go to the mall, and luckily we live in Southern California and San Diego with open air malls. And a lot of the retailers have taken to renovating these spaces. And, I was in Chicago last week and I interviewed the CEO of a large commercial development REIT at Shop Talk. And he was mentioning, COVID was kind of a period of time where like there were certain retailers that were just kind of hanging on for dear life. We all know their names.
Yeah.
And COVID was kind of the thing that just needed to come along and put some of those brands out of their misery for good in order to open up to new business models and new retailers, a new breed of retailers that would come in and fill those places and be better anchor tenants for the larger ecosystem. And if you think about like what you just talked about, this trend of the pop-up, they now, all of these almost probably by design and by need, a lot of these shopping malls have had to come up with more flexible terms with retailers and give them the ability to test new markets and maybe come in for 2-3 months as a pop-up and then scale up if they can find appropriate demand and needs. So it almost reinvented the idea of what a modern retail and a lease looks like. And then you also see so many of these brands are now not just thinking of retail as like a physical experience where, people can come in and take products to the front of the store and check them out, but their content creation hubs, their places to hang out, their brand experience centers, they're essentially digital billboards as you walk, across these spaces. So I think the modern retailer, especially inside the shopping mall, understands a lot more of the potential outside of transactions that these spaces can bring.
I think with millennials, remember we went through the whole museum of ice cream type, everything was sort of like that. That was very much became about capturing the moment and, showing that you were there. Whereas this generation really is more about immersing yourself in the moment and experiencing something new and different. And so they love to explore. I mean, it was funny when we talked to, I think we had a couple of kids from Ohio in our focus group, and they were talking about this like Asian grocery store that they love to go to, or their version of Erewhon. And so they're much more adventurous in what they're willing to try, and much more knowledgeable in terms of global trends that are coming from, across different countries. And, in that sense, they have a very adventurous, sophisticated palette.
Yeah, my youngest daughter is 9, so she's pretty close to this age range, and she has the older sister. So we were bringing her back from a commercial she was shooting in Lancaster, and the Tesla made us stop in Costa Mesa, and they have an entire mall that is all Korean. Like every store, every retail space, like the whole mall is Korean, and like she was in absolute heaven, getting boba, checking out the toys, checking out the Korean skincare brands, which I'm hearing Korean skincare is now bigger than any other skincare as a category, which is pretty exciting too. I wanted to briefly talk about messaging. So when you now have this new generation, Gen Alpha, making decisions on experiences that are important and as important to a family as what car to buy and where to go on vacation, how do brands have to change their messaging to appeal to that audience while appealing to their core consumer, but also keep in mind, COPA compliance, the idea that you're not technically supposed to be targeting people 13 and younger. How does marketing messaging have to change to take this new consumer into consideration while remaining true to the core consumer that they're trying to go after?
I think brands have to remember that, you're competing for attention. It used to be like, okay, if you're a clothing brand, you're competing against another clothing brand, or if you're a car brand, you're competing against another automotive brand. But what you're competing for is attention, right? It's so hard to get people's attention, and it's not like, they're exposed because of the internet and social, and the ubiquity of technology. Gen Alpha has direct access to brands and marketplaces. They're seeing the same thing. They're sharing the same platforms and contents as their parents, right? So they see the same things. It's just sort of how they interact, and they're very well aware. They're very well aware, and I think we talked about how do they discover brands. And I think there was a whole section that talked about sort of the gamification of life and the brands that sort of interest the kids. And one of the brands, like, for example, they gave the Chipotle, and they talked about how Chipotle did a partnership with Roblox. And you were able to get a free burrito, I believe, it was like an ingredient. And it was a challenge where if you were to collect all 52 ingredients, the first 50,000 people would get a free burrito. And that was like super, I think that they did super well. It was one of their best promotions. And it was that sort of like and that exact sort of gaming element that really attracted them. Other brands like, Temu, which is, obviously not specifically targeting tweens, but like they're aware of that brand because they make everything feel urgent and exclusive. And, there's a countdown ticker and a wheel, and you have to get all this right away. And so, it's hard to sort of maintain their attention. And we notice, like with brands in general, the way that Gen Alpha shops is different. It's not a funnel. It's not even this infinity loop. It's like an open world game. They jump in, jump out at different points, and they expect brands to interact with them in a way that feels like they are always getting something or leveling up or, unlocking discounts or badges or prizes, exclusive access. And if they don't have this, they tend to get very bored. And so, and whatever the brand is, they definitely don't seem to have any brand loyalty. There's definitely brands that they like, that they go to. Like they consistently all talked about how they love Balenciaga, they love Nike, right? Apple, like who doesn't love Apple? They all like Starbucks, and a lot of them talked about the loyalty.
Oh my gosh, Starbucks is out of control.
Yeah, on Starbucks, Aritzia, Sephora, Amazon. And those aren't brands that are necessarily, they're not tween brands, right? They're just regular adult brands. But I think the way that they interact with, they're very engaging, is what keeps these consumers coming back, because they get bored very quickly. So if you are not engaging with them in a way where they feel like they're sort of progressing and consistently interacting with the brand, they're going to lose interest very fast.
Yeah, I think Starbucks is all around the secret menu. Like they get these ideas for these drinks that they see in social, and then they go in, they ask about this exclusive thing that isn't on the menu, and they feel part of like a secret club or something.
They love that. They love that social currency and that exclusive access where they can say that they discovered it and get the clout to show like we found it, and you didn't know about it and now you do. So, who doesn't love that?
Right. Yeah, totally. It's like unlocking, a part of a video game for the first time, or being the first that does this particular thing. So I want to get into gaming and into Roblox specifically in a minute, but I was curious, as you guys juxtaposed Gen Z and Gen Alpha, one of the things that I always found really interesting about the Gen Z studies is this statistic that I would continuously hear as somebody involved in creator marketing in a former life, that 67% of Gen Zs polled wanted to become creators of some kind when they, became adults. I'm wondering if that has continued to grow. Do Gen Alphas still see themselves as aspiring to be professional content creators of some sort when they get older? Or is like what you were saying, like they understand influence in a different way, and it's not necessarily like this aspirational career path. They're just like, oh, I am an influencer, and I always will be an influencer in some way, whether I aspire to be like a content creator or like a YouTuber or something like that.
I think their definition of influencer and who has influence is very different. Like the one thing that was very clear is they were not as enthralled with celebrity and big name influencers as Gen Z was, and that they were more interested. Like I think, what did we say? That they're growing up in an internet that rewards the moment. So being viral is more important than being vital. So they're more interested in like finding someone who just happened to become famous and viral for whatever reason, versus like following somebody because they have all these different followers, right? So they're focusing on the content and the subject versus the person. Of course, there's going to be kids who want to be influential and be an influencer, but I think most of them want to have a platform they can monetize. So that was something that was very interesting, is like, they've got like your daughter, like they've got this business mind, that they're always thinking, this entrepreneurial mindset where they're thinking, how can I monetize this? How can I make money from this? And it's not necessarily, the answer isn't like, okay, well, if I get 50,000 followers, then I'll be able to do that. They're looking at it in sort of different ways. So I think, for creators, they're looking for people that remind them of themselves. They want a little bit more authenticity. I think there is a little bit of the shine is off some of these larger influencers who are hugely influential, but at the same time, I think they question whether, are they promoting this because they actually use it, or are they promoting this because they're getting paid for it, which I guess is, not uncommon, amongst Gen Z or even millennials. But that was the one thing that was very clear. They were not as interested in fame.
That's interesting. It's almost as social media has kind of gone in the direction of TikTok, de-emphasizing followers and emphasizing the algorithm. We're almost in, a post-follower society on social, where the idea of who can go viral has been democratized or flatlined, and anybody at any moment can go viral if the right content is shown to the right people and the right amount of people engage with it. It almost feels like their idea of, the follower economy or the creator economy is more flat and democratized than in prior instances. So they don't really care about the follower count or the name. They care about, that particular piece of content in the moment that's resonating with the right audience.
They're interested in following the moment. And I think
that's cool.
Almost half said that they were more interested in following somebody who is relatable than who has a.
Interesting. Okay. All right. I wanted to talk a little bit about, this trend around gaming. Roblox is massive. You guys mentioned it in the work with Chipotle. Over 90 million concurrent monthly logins, 90 million per month on Roblox now, 50% female. The way I see my kids play is that they all get into a game together, and then they all call each other on like Facebook, or I always thought that the kids would have like headphones on and they'd be talking to strangers in the game.
Right.
They don't actually want to do that. They want to do like a Facebook video call, or they want to have a group phone call, like a conference call, but they want it to be private, that nobody else can hear, nobody can be in. and they want to play the game. They're multitasking of like talking and having like a multi-person phone call, but then they're also playing the game at the same time. Did you guys unlock any trends around like how kids are using gaming, not something to do and something to like excel at and kind of collect points and collect badges and collect virtual currency and level up, but also as a way that they use it to just like hang out, congregate, and socialize with their friends?
So that's a good question. We focused more on sort of, I think, the mechanics of gamification within brand engagement versus actual gaming. But obviously, platforms like Roblox and oh my God, I forgot the other one.
Minecraft.
Yeah, like things like that. Fortnite is very popular. And they do sort of do it together. It's also a good way to do new brands, right? I think to introduce new brands. So in the focus group, one of the kids was talking about how he wanted Balenciaga slides. And we were like, how do you even know about Balenciaga? And he was saying he saw it on Roblox. He saw that it was a partnership. And, and so while he can't afford to get any type of, Balenciaga, well, actually even slides, right? But, clothing, it is a way for them to come sort of, brand recognition and then, make it aspirational so they can get maybe a keychain or whatever it is. But I thought it was very interesting how aware, well, one, that these brands were doing this, but also how aware these kids were of the brands.
That's cool. So the partnerships don't feel like they're forced or they're not welcome in these environments. They're actually celebrated by the kids and they become aspirational because they've entered the environments with authenticity.
We also saw these kids are also very good at gaming the system, which is figuring out the hacks within different loyalty different programs, and figuring out ways that they can unlock a reward or get like a free item. Like they were really good at that, and that they were even teaching, their parents, right? Hey, you're not using your loyalty point at Starbucks or at Lululemon the right way. Here's how you need to do that. So they're very much aware of that. They're very, very savvy, and they're teaching parents how to redeem them and what's the best way to sort of look at the brand and, how to interact. And so and because of that, the parents are becoming a little bit more savvy themselves, and a little bit more aware of some of the benefits of interacting with certain brands. So I thought that was very interesting. But, the other thing that they said was, what was it? 75% talked about how points or badges or early access will make them open an app more. So if they don't feel that they can have that, they won't even open the app. So I thought that was very interesting. But then, we have this conversation, if everything is gamified, are you going to get fatigue later on where it's like, they're sort of sick of all of this? And so that was sort of like one of our, advice for brands was, we're not saying make everything a game, but make shopping feel more like an adventure versus an interaction. And really that was sort of like the main takeaway that we were trying to explain.
Yeah, I love that. I remember my daughter came to me and she's like, I need $1. I need to keep my snap streak going with so-and-so. And I like missed one day of the snap streak. I'm like, I'm not giving you $1 just to like give to this app so that you can say that you did this. It's like that idea of, like inside of games, like continuing to have like a certain level of access and exclusivity, I think is pretty interesting. But
yeah,
I haven't heard that as much
Snap.
lately.
That's definitely
yeah, for sure. Okay, one thing that I thought was interesting is you said you quoted that unlike older generations, Gen Alpha does not mind AI generated advertising. So where many of us traditional generations up to this point have seen AI generated advertising as inauthentic, maybe trying to trick us. Maybe we somehow feel that the workers that are being displaced by AI are getting a raw deal, whatever the thing is. Older generations have been less receptive to AI in advertising and in marketing in general. Why do you think Gen Alpha is less concerned, and what should marketers take from that in how they decide to continue to experiment with AI in the creative process?
Yeah, so I believe the statistic was, I think the question was, we had asked Gen Alpha if they found out a photo or a video that they liked or created was altered using AI, how would they feel? And I believe only 25% said that their reaction would be that they would be upset or angry. And then 34% said that they would think it was cool. And then I think 1 in 5 wouldn't care either way. Or it wouldn't change, how they feel. Whereas like obviously, like right now, you're starting to see some backlash when brands do use AI models. People get very upset. But I think one of the things that we talked about, how to this generation, AI is going to feel like electricity. It is just going to be integrated in everyday life. It's going to be in the background. You're not going to think about it. And every element that you interact with is probably going to have it. And when it becomes that ubiquitous, they're going to not really care about if it's real or not. Well, one of the things that we did when we did some predictions too, is that we talked about how is it possible in the future that when something is, like right now, when something is organic or non-GMO, is in the future, if something is going to have a label that says human made, that it's going to be something that's special because everything is going to be AI generated in some way. And so I'm curious to see, just at the rapid pace at which AI is evolving, if 5 years, 2 years, 1 year, if that's something that we're going to see, and that's actually why in our methodology, we integrated a synthetic audience through our platform, Definity. So we did everything through, we did these 3 surveys through YouGov with actual Gen Alpha 1535 Gen Alpha kids. But we also did the same survey with synthetic audience digital twins that mirrored that. And then the same thing with the focus group. We actually interviewed we interviewed millennial parents and their Gen Alpha kids, and then we created we mirrored that and did a synthetic audience focus group, just because we wanted to see sort of like what the answers were. And they were pretty similar. They were at least with the survey where we could compare apples to apples. The answers were like 95 accuracy. It was interesting.
Wow. So basically, focus group, online panel, and a digital synthesized audience, essentially pretty much getting within 95% strike rate with those 3 cohorts.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about some of the kids, one of the things I had talked about in the focus groups, you could see they had this entrepreneurial and marketing mindset. And then the AI parents were saying the same thing, that they were like, oh, my kid is thinking, he's in middle school, but he's already thinking about building his brand and his NIL deal, in a few years. And so, it is true. They definitely think a little bit different, a lot different than, when I was 12 years old.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, if you were to give a marketer, one piece of advice about trying to influence this generation in a way that could be meaningful for their brand, what advice would you give them?
Be transparent, build trust through transparency. We know that Gen Alpha is fluent in the algorithm. And so they understand how content gets served. And that, if you are, promoting or pushing, be transparent about it and be very clear, because they appreciate that. And then, there's just also sort of, I guess, this responsibility, right? Especially in marketing, right? Right now, you hear a lot about you have to be AI findable. Because if you're a brand and you're not showing up in AI or ChatGPT or Google Gemini or whatnot, you're sort of at a disadvantage. And so you need to make sure that you're not just followable, but also findable. But at the same time, we sort of have a responsibility, I guess, as marketers, in a way to ethically, understand this and, not exploit. It's so hard to say, but not exploit this generation, right? You're not just selling a product, you're shaping behavior. And that we're saying like that is a privilege, not a conversion hack.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so if Gen Alpha is already rewriting the rules at 11 to 14, what is your major prediction, or what's one of your biggest predictions of how the landscape will start to change as they become teens and as they enter the core buying demographic of 18 to 34?
We talked about the whole human made. We think human made is going to be the new handmade. So we definitely think that it'll be so embedded like electricity that its absence will be sort of unusual, and that AI used here, I think we said, is going to be as common as like contain nuts on the label. We think that because Gen Alpha, because they're raised in this reward economy and they are so used to, or the behavior is that they expect to unlock rewards and to get all these different prizes, is that they're going to turn life into this monetized game. And so I think the examples that we gave was they're going to send their cars out at night to earn passive income on, autonomous rideshare. They're going to rent billboard space on their personal social accounts. They're going to swap tips, on online forums on how to hack loyalty systems. To them, everything is going to be sort of how they can monetize it. Just like your daughter is already like, how can I make real estate at 11? Which is pretty impressive.
No, I think it's great. I think there's already this sad notion of like, I think I heard the other day that 53% of Gen Z currently coming out of college is not finding a job within the first 12 months. So it's pretty staggering, like, how much the unemployment rate is, or how much longer it's taking kids to kind of find the traditional corporate paths. So I think Gen Alpha probably, as they begin to rethink what work looks like in the future, the idea of the freelance economy, the gig economy, being able to have many sources of passive income, and not the phony gimmicky ones, but like really truly designing your life to create your own freedom and your own definition of what work looks like, what education looks like. I think it's going to be pretty exciting as these kids start to come online and what they're going to be able to do. Well, Monica, this was fascinating. This was the first deep dive into Gen Alpha that I've been able to have with a marketer on the show so far. So I really thank you guys for coming up with this fascinating research and bringing these insights to our community. As a father of a Gen Alpha, it was really fun for me to kind of diagnose my own case study of one, and just to be aware of these trends, because I was aware of them already as a dad and as a marketer, but to have them kind of pointed out specifically and backed up by research, I think will allow me to continue to see these things play out in our household. And as a marketer, that's always your favorite experimental laboratory, right? Is that case study of one with you and your family and your kids.
You've got your own focus group. You get a front row seat to see how all of this unfolds, and if our predictions come true.
Yep. No, I'm excited to follow along. So if people want to deep dive into the research, if they want to find out more, where would you like to send the audience to, find out more about Alpha Rising and the study, connect with ACC, connect with you directly? Where would you like to send folks?
You can go to download the report. You can go to our website, which is accelerationcc.com. And then all you have to do is just give us your name and email, and you can download the report.
Beautiful. Well, Monica, thank you so much for coming on to the Ad Podcast today and chatting with us a little bit about this research. I found it absolutely fascinating. For those of you who are at home, if this is the very first time you're seeing the Ad Podcast, don't forget to give us a subscribe or follow so you can see other conversations with marketing leaders like Monica in the future. If you're listening, if you give us an honest review, that's how we find a bigger audience organically. And last but not least, if you have a Gen Alpha parent out there like myself that you think might be interested in hearing about this conversation, a marketer who needs to figure out how to communicate with this generation as their brand continues to evolve in this brave new world, don't forget to share the show. And with that, I will let you go. Thanks so much, Monica. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.